Okay, so we're going to go ahead and look at the benefits of using QuickBooks Enterprise with user and security. In a Pro Premier level product, there are 8 different levels of permissions that you can have. So it's very generic, right? So if you have accounts receivable access, you can, create invoices, sales receipts, estimates, etc. So it's a lot more generic. In Enterprise, you can be very specific as to what permissions you can create. This is really important with growing companies, both for the protection of the staff, right? Whoever's going to be in the QuickBooks file, they shouldn't want to have access to the things or the areas of the program that they shouldn't have access to or that they don't need, right? It's just less ways for things to potentially go wrong. As well, the company, right, wants to segregate those duties to make sure that people are handling their area that they're responsible for and that they don't have the ability to affect other areas that they're not responsible for working with inside of QuickBooks. All right, so first of all, you do need to be in as the administrator, and we're going to go up to company and users and then set up users and roles. Right, it's going to default on the user list here, so we can go through how to set up a new user in a different video, but we're going to pay attention to the roles. So Enterprise does come with some preset roles, right? All of these you can duplicate or edit, except for, and you can also create a new one from scratch. You cannot edit the external accountant, or you cannot edit the admin. Okay, so those are the 2 that you cannot edit in here. But we can create a role from scratch, let's just say, and we'll call this an AP clerk. And you can put in a description, of course. It's always important. I always say put in as much details as possible so you remember why you did this in the future. Hiring new admin clerk. Okay, so then we have all of our different roles and access areas. So first of all, you can see if we go through these, we have accounting, right? Do they have access to the accounting tools? That's new in Enterprise 15, right? So that's kind of like the client data review area. To the asset registers, to edit closed transactions, right? They still need the password, but if they have the password, can they do it? Equity registers, journal entries. Notice when I click on some of them, so if I click on accounting, I have none or full access. When I click on a transaction level, like a journal entry, I have view, create, modify, delete, or print access. Okay. So I always encourage you to go through each of these. I'm going to go through them pretty quickly and point out the most important ones. Banking, if they're going to connect to online banking, you need to give them access to that. You can segregate out which bank accounts they have access to. Right, so perhaps this AP clerk has access to the company checking account. They can view it. Can't do anything else. And they do not have access to the payroll clearing account, as an example. Okay. Checks, we can say view, create, modify, delete. I'm just going to say view for this AP clerk. Credit card charges, register, credit card register. This all falls under banking, of course. Similar to the drop downs up top here. Deposits, loan manager, transfer funds. Then we have our centers, right? So maybe this AP clerk can view the customer center, but they can't create, modify, delete, print, view balances. Maybe they can view the employee list, but they can't do anything else. And maybe they can view and create entries, maybe modify, maybe not create even, right? It's an AP clerk, so can't create new vendors, but can modify vendors to change those prices or change those addresses, and they can view the balance. Then we have under company, right? Billing solutions, calendar, a whole bunch of stuff that most people won't be using. Find all transactions, that's if you hit Control F, right? And that means all transactions, anything. So if you can give people access to that. Income tracker, insights on the home page, planning and budgeting, print labels, set closing date password, right? So this is not an admin only function. If they can set up bank feeds, so if they have a new bank or a new credit card account, can we do that? And then synchronize contacts. Customers and receivables, right? This is pretty transaction heavy. Accounts receivable accounts, finance charges, change item prices, that's on the item card, right? Credit memos, estimates, invoices, override credit limit, that's one of the preferences in here. Statements, undeposited funds, view credit card numbers, right? You want to make sure that most people do not have access to that. Okay. Then we get into employee and payroll, right? Paychecks, payroll adjustments, liabilities, right? And this is all create, modify, delete, e-pay, print and e-pay. Important to note. Then we have file changes, or access to the file. So can they do a backup? Can they clean up company data? Can they export, import? Can they use advanced reporting, right? We'll go into that in a later video. Can they do a rebuild, shipping, and verify? So you really want to be paying attention to what people have access to do here, right? You don't want them to go in and do a condense on your file on accident. Then we have our lists, right? So chart of accounts list, and again, can they create, modify, delete entries, print, list, view balances? So chart of accounts, class, currencies, customer and vendor profile, that can be expanded to see other things like terms, sales rep, customer messages, etc. We have our fixed asset item list, inventory site list, other names list. I would say don't give anybody access to that. Price level list, price rule list, template list. Then we have reports here. So the reports area basically follows when you click the reports button, it gives you some generic categories right down the middle. So that's what this follows. So if you give them access to banking reports, they have access to the 4 or 5 different banking reports that show up in that drop down. Okay. So if I cancel out of here, I'll show you real quick. If I go to reports and banking, right, if they have access to banking reports, they would have access to all of these reports. If they have access to sales reports, they would have access to all of these reports. Along those same lines, if they have access to memorized reports, they have access to all of these reports, right? Again, something to be very aware of. Okay. So you can see all the different reports in here. Okay. Find report also is an important one for them to be able to see, maybe. Not for the AP clerk to be able to see, but for people who have access to see all or full access, it doesn't pick up this find report for some reason. So make sure you check on that. Time tracking, right? And this is create, modify, delete, import, export, and weekly timesheets. Then we have vendors and payables. So for the AP clerk, I know that I started this over again and I didn't save it. So let me just get started here again. So we can say, they can view the accounts payable counts, cannot adjust quantity on hand. Maybe they can view build assemblies if this is a manufacturing company. They can create, modify bills, can't delete them. They're an AP clerk. Maybe they are, we have a separate area that is the warehouse that is receiving items in the system. So maybe the AP clerk can only view item receipts, right? Okay. If you do not have enhanced inventory turned on, of course, then the AP clerk would have to be able to modify item receipts to turn them over into bills, right? And maybe they can view bill payments, but they can't create, modify, delete, or print them. Okay. And then maybe view purchase orders. All right. So enterprise obviously has a lot higher level of security, and you want to make sure to take advantage of that when you're setting up your company file.